Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Conquer the Clutter podcast for March the 27th. We are almost through this winter period. Yay, rock on. So we're going to carry on with the attachment process material, and we're going to pick it up at age 3 to 4, all right? However, one of the things I want you to be doing while we're covering this material is I want you to be writing down anything that has particular impact for you. If it tweaks a memory, if it feels suddenly more intense, I want you just to be writing that segment down. All right, so that later on, the material that I'm presenting, when you can go in and watch the video because it's being posted on hoarding.ca, you can start tracking what is your particular formula. And maybe the periods of your life where things went particularly well or things went a little off ideal. All right. So by age 3 or 4, we were talking about physical separation, we were talking about proximity, and by that age, we're becoming, it's not a surprise, a little more independent. So physical separation isn't any longer such a threat to our bond to the caregiver as a child, okay? The caregiver, the attachment figure, okay? And threats to security in older children, 3 to 4 and older, all right, arise from prolonged absence and breakdowns in communication. So that's where the spoken exchange starts to make a difference, right? So the prolonged threat, the prolonged absence to the attachment figure. I mean, there are critical limits, but that prolonged absence isn't quite as important for us, right? And what is important, however, is that if it exceeds our tolerance level, all right? So depending on in the earlier phases, how often we were triggered by unreliable or unsupportive caregiving. Our needs weren't met. We were left too long a time without some supportive, responsive caregiver meeting our needs. So we don't have the same threshold. We have much more urgent limits for having someone reliable who is responsive and within a narrow band of individuals, all right? So predictable, all right? Doesn't have to be the same person, remember that, who responds to us every time. But the younger we are, well, except right at birth and for, say, 2-3 months after that. In the majority of our infancy, the predictability of a range, a known range of identifiable people and people who are responsive, that's critical. To the extent that doesn't happen, we become more reactive as we mature because our foundation piece for predictable security, predictably feeling that we're safe, somebody will respond, somebody will, in short order, meet our needs. All right. So then by 3 and 4, that prolonged absence would be more critical for us. The inverse is true as well. As an infant, after 2-3 months up to probably 6 months to 2 years, in that period of time where our response person wasn't predictable or wasn't supportive, wasn't effective in meeting our needs well enough, we become more vulnerable. All right. Okay. So the threats to security in older children and adults happen because of those beyond our tolerance, prolonged absences, and communication starts to be that communication exchange. And it doesn't have to necessarily be just words, any verbalizations, all right, that breakdown in communication, or they respond, but they're not effective. There is not an emotion, they're emotionally unavailable, all right? Or we also start to become more aware of signs of rejection, signs and signals of abandonment, right? So here are the attachment behaviors that start to become factored in. So we'll start today, all right, considering, as I said before, I want you to apply this, what I'm about to present, to your unique situation as it occurs to you. So the whole attachment behavioral system's purpose, the whole purpose is to maintain or achieve closer proximity, to keep that attachment figure, that caregiver, that reliable, responsive person or group, small group of people close to us, accessible. All right, they don't have to be with us every moment of every day, but we have to know that when we are distressed, someone, preferably, ideally, in that narrow band of caregivers will respond to us, all right? And the closer proximity to the attachment figure or figures, pre-attachment behaviors, all right, become more secure. And so in that first 6 months of life, that's our first phase, all right? Before that, really, we'll pretty much take anybody. We have preferences. We respond, we recognize. We'll pretty much take anybody who comes, responds to us, and is receptive to our needs. We can sense that. All right. Now, our needs are pretty basic: to be held, to be touched, to be comfortable, not to be left wet, not to be left hungry. Right. So, in those first 6 months of life, during the first phase, get this, is the first 8 weeks. All right. Infants, we say that they don't smile, that they just have gas, but there is actually no evidence of that. There can be that identifying visual connection where it elicits a physical response in the form of a smile, babbling, all right, crying. All of these attachment behaviors are designed to attract the attention of potential caregivers in that first 8 weeks. All right. We're willing to attract anybody, as I said. Okay. So although infants in that time frame learn to discriminate between caregivers, their behaviors, our behaviors, were directed at anyone in the vicinity Now, during the second phase, which is 8 weeks to 6 months, we become more increasingly discriminative of who's familiar. We like familiarity, particularly if we associate that familiarity with somebody who got it right. Frankly, we were dry, we were fed, we were held, we felt that connection, we were touched appropriately. All right. We will accept unfamiliar adults because at a primal level, we understand, we are aware at some level that we're vulnerable and that our survival depends on somebody coming and getting it reasonably right. When we get the familiar adult caregiver responder, we become naturally more responsive to that person. All right. And we identify them as not just the responder or somebody who happened to come, but as somebody who can provide care. They become identified as our caregiver. Are there any stories in your family about illness, about something that impeded that process? Nobody, probably no one meant to do it. This is a critical time as well for postnatal depression. All right. And so when that is not identified accurately and the person is given, the adult is given the appropriate effective care themselves, this can be a critical disruption in our formation of attachment patterns. All right. And so we're not looking to blame anyone here. We're looking to identify where there might have been a lack or a gap or some other interfering process. Now, later on, we do the babbling, the crying, the whatever. Later on, we start adding that physical touch, that clinging as an attachment behavior. And now we have an ever increasing repertoire of attachment behaviors that draw people into us and that keep them there as long as we identify our strongest needs. Okay, so clear-cut attachment, all right, develops in the third phase. So phase 1 up to 2 months, phase 2, 2 months to 6 months. That's phase 2. Phase 3 is between ages 6 months and 2 years. Sorry, I've got that backwards. The third phase is 6 months to 2 years. All right. And infancy, birth to 8 weeks, 8 weeks to 6 months is phase 2. Phase 3 is 6 months to 2 years. This is a particularly critical. This is widely identified and validated as a very critical period, 6 months to 2 years. What was happening in your family of origin? All right. What was happening in that time that supported or didn't support you receiving the response, the care, and the affirmation that you were safe? Right? The infant's behavior toward the caregiver in this 6 months to 2 years we start to become more organized little beings. All right. And because we're young, very young, we start to organize around goal-directed activities, goal-directed behaviors. And they all have one purpose, And that is to achieve any conditions that make us as a child, as an infant, feel secure. All right. And secure isn't just physically safe, it's that we started to respond to touch as well. All right. So we were soothed, we were rocked. Maybe, our caregiver cooed at us or talked to us or sang to us. It becomes organized around all of the indicators that we could identify in the 6 months to 2 years as somebody is here, I am safe, and this is predictable. I can count on this, right? By the end of the first year, all right, as an infant, we're still really an infant at that stage, we're more able to display an increased range of attachment behaviors. Again, entirely designed to maintain keeping that person with us. So this is, our little cute routines that keep our attachment figure, our caregiver, focusing on us and not too far out of eyesight. Okay, so these kind of proximity behaviors, and you might ask yourself too, at this age in your life, at this stage, the age you are you still engaging in any of these behaviors? And do they go back to learning this really worked at this 1-year-old to 2-year-old phase? So these proximity behaviors show themselves as protesting. Okay, so at 1, we became protesters. All right. And and that would be when we sensed that the caregiver was out of reach, all right, was leaving us, maybe was handing us over to another person, and they were putting on their coat. It's amazing the signals that we could pick up. All right. Now, we weren't particularly vulnerable, but we sensed vulnerability because for an infant, predictability is what we're looking for. All right. So we started to protest, and then we started to greet. We really want to give our caregiver, okay, a high, like you're the most important person in the universe, and I, this wonderful, delightful child, I'm so happy to see you, is a huge warmth to the person who loves you. Now they've become special in your eyes. Can you see that there is an exchange there? All right. Clinging when frightened. All right. And your caregiver, your responder soothes you. All right. There's an exchange there. There's starting to be a transactional relationship now. You're validating them and they're validating you. All right. They are soothing you and you are giving them the feedback. This is really working. Keep it coming. All right. So when a child is frightened at that age, one of the attachment behaviors is clinging. All right. Have you ever heard of clinging children? All right. The other, as the toddler, the infant becomes, this is, most children start to walk somewhere around 11, 12, 13 months. All right. So you're pre that 2-year critical boundary. And following, whether it's crawling, walking, toddling, you've got little walkers and things and you're rolling around, you want proximity. All right. So following your caregiver becomes an attachment pattern. Do you still do that? Are you still in an adult form when you want your needs met? Cooing, crying, protesting, following, clinging. Any of those still present in any form? All right. This is where it started. And know that As an adult, we start to apply different meanings to our behaviors, but know that old patterns die hard, all right? Particularly if they worked. And so just identify for yourself, all right? Yeah, yes, you're right. Clinging can be codependence. Yes, it can be. All right. Just know, take a step back now. I ask you to give yourself a little more independence. Look at your behaviors when you're distressed now, clinging to your things, holding on to your things because they represent security and safety. And even when they don't represent security and safety, they do usually, okay, in 23 and a half years, I've heard a lot of, I know, but at least I know I haven't thrown out anything that I might need later. Is that not clinging behavior? Is that not attachment behavior? All right. And how is that working for you? Are you actually settling for that thing to be your caregiver, your caretaker, your responder? All right. And this isn't too far-fetched. It is the same cognitive attachment that you had as an infant. All right. And when you are feeling threatened or distressed or insecure, are any of those behaviors still in your repertoire? And how are they working for you? Because remember, as a child, you might have had less complicated or complex attachment behaviors in that you went for the person who would show up, who would successfully meet your needs. All right. And you were able even then to discriminate between those who actually became caregivers instead of just familiar faces who responded. All right. You were able to sort out the caregivers. Are your things still caregiving? Are they really? How effective is that? All right. Okay. So when we as children begin to explore, all right, as infants, we begin to use our caregiver as a safe base from which to explore. All right. So we don't have to be in their arms. We don't have to be right beside them. We do prefer that they're within eyesight. All right. We do prefer that. But we will use them as a safe setting off, departing point. All right. Still keeping them within eye view, so that we can go back to them if we want to. But we start to branch out. We start to explore from there. All right. Now, when we as infants engage in this exploring behavior, all right, it is much more likely to happen when our caregiver is present. If our caregiver, now it's not just the responder, remember, it's the caregiver, it's that secure person or small group of people. When they're present, we're a whole lot more adventuresome. All right. And isn't that true of most of us today? That when we feel secure, all right, we do the same thing. We're far more likely to be adventuresome. We're far more likely to take calculated risks, to try experiments. Would you say that that's true or not true? I'd be interested in hearing that in the chat. And where do you think it started? All right. So we may be whatever age we are, but we are incrementally moving out from the same points of attachment in whatever level we ended up developing as a result of the experiences in our formative years. Okay, so why is that? Because The infant's attachment system, we as infants up to say a year, 2 years, all right, starts to relax. Okay. We start to feel safe. We start to feel free. All right. Ask yourself right now, all right, what would it take for you to feel relaxed, for you to feel safe and free, to explore, finding among the things you have, those things that are not actually effective, essential attachment items. Things that, and remember too, that we give in 90% of cases, we give items their importance. We're assigning that meaning. In and of themselves, very, very, very little that we have actually is fundamental to our mental, physical, or emotional health. Very little. So if you've got a lot of things that are built up around you, you've got some pretenders in there. What would it take for you to feel secure and relaxed enough to take the same risk you took as an infant, a child, a toddler, crawling, hobbling around on pieces of furniture, exploring? What would it take? Because you could do it then. And you know what? You were a whole lot less secure then than you are now. You're far more aware of what your safety margins are. If you think about it, if you spend a little time exploring and digging, you can figure out what your needs are. What would it take for you to look at a lot of the things that you have and identify the pretenders, the hangers on that aren't giving you security? They aren't giving you anything other than a headache and reasons to feel bad and overwhelmed. What would be the worst that would happen? And here's a question I don't ask you very often. And given whatever those feelings or reactions would be, how long would they last? How long would they actually last? 2, 3 days? Periodically, when you think of it, you have just a little reaction of insecurity. Is that going to change anything? And have you ever had something break so it was not available, lost in the piles, and you needed it and you didn't have it? What did you do? How is it that you are still secure today, relatively secure today? What did you do instead? My experience, and I offer you to think about it from your point of view, is that happens to me all the time. All right. I either don't want to make the effort to go in the drawer, find and I use something else instead. This week, could you, as homework, do a little experimenting? And that is, when you can't find, don't have, whatever, it's not within reach, something, an item, a device, all right, that you want for some purpose, I'd like you to run a little experiment that I'm hoping will free you up, all right, that will give you your own secure experience of. And I have other things that I can substitute, so I am never going to be incapacitated, derailed. I'm never going to pay a consequence that I can't live with. and life will pretty much continue. All right. Because when we feel that insecurity, of, oh, I don't have, oh, I can't let this thing go because, and we assign a meaning, that is generally, I would say 95 to 98% of the time, an exaggeration. All right. Experiment this week with finding using substitutes. And then keep that experience fresh in your mind when you're doing sorting, when you're doing your 15 minutes a day. Okay, try it. We could do it as toddlers. We can sure as shootin' do it as adults. Okay. Now, if we choose not to, that's a whole different choice. That's a choice. That's not actually a reality. All right. Now, if the caregiver, however, is inaccessible or unresponsive, we revert to what we call the attachment proximity behavior. It's just a $10 word for whatever gets them to respond and come close enough that we feel, okay, they're within a safe range. I'm good. All right. And that if they're inaccessible or they become unresponsive for whatever reason, could be illness, could be mom and dad needed to get a job, could be another baby was born, could be anything that makes them not as accessible. They can't respond. They can't be in close proximity to you every time you need it. All right. That attachment, draw them in behavior, get their attention, starts to happen more strongly. And it also starts to generate fear. All right. Because we're still at a primal level. We're still not able to make our destiny happen. Our destiny and our safety depend on somebody else responding. Also, if during that period of time you as an infant or a toddler became ill, all right, or you just became, every time you were fatigued, you didn't take your nap, you didn't sleep well, all right, you had gas, you had colic, whatever, all right, that will cause that insecure attachment behavior. You've got to come, you've got to come, you've got to come, you've got to come to kick into gear. Did any of that happen at a critical time? It's not your destiny. It's just an interesting correlation that I want you to see. Is that part of what fuels some of your attachment behaviors now? It's not going to be the whole story. We became a whole lot more complex beyond age 2, believe me. All right. It's not our whole story. It is not our destiny. However, is it part of what adds weight to the feelings of insecurity about thinning out the things you are applying attachment to? Because those things, they will never give you what you need. They will never make you safe. They will never care about you. They will never meet your needs. They're just things. And we give them a meaning and they're useful. All right. But they are not essential in the numbers that exist when they've become a problem. When they have deprived you of safe, secure, peaceful environments to live in, to let your life play out, to give you options. All right. They're never going to do that. So the meaning that's being applied to them is out of proportion. All right. Just think about that. Now, after the second year, okay, as the child begins to be able to see the caregiver as an independent person, they start to have a sense of separateness, all right, in and around 2. And that's why they're so little devilish individuals at 2. All right. And they explore the limits. There's a reason why 2-year-olds, the most common word said to a 2-year-old is no, no, no. All right. Because they are on major exploration, major tests the boundaries. And they see they're able to appreciate that other person actually is a separate person. All right. And so our relationship, our interaction as 2-year-olds becomes more complicated. And it also becomes, we're getting to be a little more of a strategist. All right. Goal adapted partnership. We see this as a partnership. All right. And there's an exchange. There's a goal adapted exchange that starts to happen. Now we're going to be negotiators. All right. And the children at that age begin to notice that the other part of this partnership, they have goals too. Mom and dad want me to eat. Mom and dad want to give me a bath. Mom and dad want me to go to bed. Mom and dad don't want me to touch X, Y, and Z. Mom and dad want me to do this instead. All right. And they also are able to start to appreciate that mom and dad, or whoever the primary caregivers are, they've got feelings too. Sometimes they get annoyed. We don't know what annoyed is, but we know it's a feeling. We know that it didn't happen before that we're aware of. And now we are in partnership. All right. So we are starting to develop more independence, more autonomy. It's not complete. And young children above the age of 2 start to plan their actions. All right. They wait for mom and dad to leave the kitchen when they open that bottom cupboard door and pull out all the pots and pans. All right. Or as my son did, as I was measuring and mixing plant food, all right, he decided he would wait for me to go to the fridge for, I don't know what it was, and down the glass of what he called Kool-Aid. All right. And we have a strategy. All right. We have a strategy at that age. All right. So, for example, all right, when babies cry, here's kind of the fundamental cutoff point around 2. When babies cry, it's because they're either in pain or they're in a state of discomfort. All right. When 2-year-olds cry, it's to call their caregiver, not necessarily because they're in any pain or discomfort, but because now they have a separate need. All right. And sometimes it's just to ensure that that caregiver is still close enough within the comfortable range. Do you have any, and codependent, whoever mentioned that, was pretty perceptive. Do you have any of those needs as an adult? Are you hanging on to those needs as an adult? How comfortable are you letting the things in your life or the people in your life out of range? And for how long? And for how long? And like the 2-year-old, not that I'm equating us to 2, but that's about where this separate person needs and wants and strategies starts. If what you do doesn't bring the person or the thing back within the comfortable range for you, What is your backup? Because a 2-year-old starts crying louder, starts making demands, starts getting into trouble somewhere, so you have to come. You know that strategy, right? Shouting. Okay. Shouting, not crying in distress, but shouting, having a temper tantrum. All right. That starts about this time. And that actually becomes a strategy, all right, for backup. What do you do and what is your time limit for separation? Okay. So here are some basic principles. Common attachment behaviors and emotions are present in most social primates. That means a primate who is capable of a social interaction, a social relationship. And that includes us, but it also includes other primates. Hence my trip to the gorillas. All right. Boy, was that evidence. All right. And their babies aren't any different from ours. And their mothers aren't any different from our mothers, believe me. All right. I exchanged just an aside. I was sitting on that little ledge watching this family interact and characters and whatever. And off to the side, the mother, okay, had moved relatively close to me and she was keeping an eye. And the baby was just, I swear that thing he was 2 years old. All right. He was majoring in 2. And I looked over at her, she looked over at me, and I swear to God, excuse me, Braden, you got to delete that. I swear, okay, she gave me a look like I've seen at play groups. We're like, kids, does it ever end? Our, I looked at her, she looked at me, and we had a woman moment. We had a mother moment. Like, I know, it gets better. Yeah, they get to be teenagers. Okay, enough said. All right, so I'm saying this happens among primates. All right, and we are just one group of primates. All right, so those attachment behaviors become adaptive. We start to adapt them. So all of this pre 2 years old, up to 2 years old, 3, 4. All right. Okay. How are you adapting now? What is the transformation of your attachment behaviors? Take a second right now. Okay. And if you can, think of 3 attachment behaviors that you personally engage in order to attract a preferred object or a preferred person. Three.
Could you repeat that, please?
Yeah. I want you to write down 3 attachment behaviors, things that you do personally to bring a preferred thing or a preferred person relationship into your comfortable zone where you know they're available to you. Now, write down 3 attachment behaviors that you engage in to prevent someone from being outside of your comfortable range or your things that you're attached to outside of your comfortable range. What would those be?
Prevent them,
Okay,
bring them.
you've got to mute. You've got to mute. No, to bring them, is first, and then to prevent them from leaving. So bring them in proximity, prevent them from being outside of your basically proximity, close enough, comfortable. I have them. I feel secure range. Everybody has them. Now, if you can, write down one thing you can do to adapt either the bringing into your proximity range, your comfortable proximity range, or one thing that you can adapt about not letting things outside of your comfortable proximity range. What would be one thing that you believe that you could adapt? So something you're doing, look at your I'm doing it list. This is what I do. So an example for things would be one thing I would do that would be an attachment behavior is I'd go shopping. I'd go online shopping. I'd go Amazon shopping. I wouldn't even leave the house. I put my feet up, get my credit card, and I buy online. Or, every time I'm out doing X, Y, and Z, there's a Winners close by. There's a Best Buy. I've got to watch myself in Best Buy. I've become an electronic magnet. So I keep going and saying, no, 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 no. That was what I would do when I go into Best Buy. Before I open the door, I say, you're not buying anything. You didn't come here with a need in the back of your head that you are actually actively looking for. It's not on the list. There's nothing on that list. You're not getting sold anything when you're in there. That's the talk I give myself. All right. Because I suddenly, at my age, have found electronics very exciting. That's what I do to adapt. The other thing I do to adapt is when I look at a lot of the things I have, all right, and I'm thinking, this is not workable, all right, don't have the space, don't have the whatever. Nope, it's time. No, it's time. And one of the things I say to myself regularly about my clothing is, and this is not a matter of, all right, nobody's obliged, but we all do these things to adapt. And I say to myself, you never choose that. You never, ever choose that. Okay, so don't give it space. Don't give it space. Or, you know what? Sometimes we acquire things, we buy things, we're given things, and it seemed like a good idea, right? It seemed like a good idea. It's just it never gets used. It never gets chosen. Even if I bought it, if within a reasonable period of time, I haven't used it, I'm not using it, I am never choosing it, I'm always going to the things I prefer, then I take it pretty much no matter how much I spent on it. I take it, clean it, donate it. That's it. Okay, because it doesn't give me anything hanging in a closet. And I don't really foresee that my life is going to change that significantly, that thing is suddenly going to become preferred. It's just not. I allow myself to make mistakes. Okay? I allow myself to make mistakes. That is an adaptive behavior. What is one adaptive behavior that you could choose, you could implement to solve or make a positive impact on something that is presenting a problem to you? What would be one thing? Because if you were doing this at 2 years of age, you can sure do it now. Is there something in your life or in your environment that is really bugging you? It's getting you down. It feels bigger than you are. Every time you look at it, you don't feel positive, you feel negative. What would be one thing, one adaptive behavior choice that you could make to resolve that? I've shared some of mine with you. What would be one for you? Doesn't have to solve it in one step. Doesn't have to solve it in one step. What would be one adaptive attachment behavior choice to either make it better? You're actually going to use the thing. You're actually going to organize it. You're going to pull it out of whatever the piles are. You're going to organize it so that it is accessible. That would be one positive. A negative would be, you know what? I have way, way, way too much of that. I'm not ready to say that I'm never going to need that information or blah, 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 blah. And maybe I make a trade with a friend and maybe I do something for them that's easy for me to do, and they do something that's easy for them to do. They scan all of this and put it on an external hard drive. I just pack it all up into a box, and I have to stop doing them favors when they finish doing this for me, and I get it done. What can I do? Because we are the masters of our own solutions. There's always something we can do that contributes positively. Might not solve it in one fell swoop, that's okay, but it moves us forward. What is one positive thing that we can do that is an adaptive behavior about something that involves our attachment to something? Now, we can have a passive attachment, or we can have an active attachment. Active attachment is this thing actually does mean like positive. Every time I look at it, I know it is. It's really important. All right. Way too many of them, or it's not where it needs to be. It's in the way. All right. Passive would be, I haven't looked at that pile in a very long time, and I'm afraid that there might be something in it that I don't have the energy to go through it. Passive might be, you know what? Pack it up, and either put it in storage for another day. Not your best solution because it's still there and it won't be in any better shape when you get around to it then. Or create that. Remember, we said that even the child sees that the other in their life, their caregiver in this case, has different needs and different behaviors. Is there somebody in your life who can assist you and be an aid to helping you resolve something that is really kind of has you on the run? You do something for them, they do something for you. Because when people talk about paper, for instance, all right, having a lot of paper in its solid form takes an awful lot of room. It also is highly combustible, so you want to be very, very careful that you aren't making basically your living spaces very dangerous. All right, trip, fall, it falls over, your neighbor has a fire, and your house is involved. I'm not meaning to be overly dramatic. These are things that actually have happened to people who've come to me, usually after they've happened. So change the form. Is there somebody who can do scanning for you and you do something else for them? Can you afford to pay somebody? There are all kinds of companies that do this. All right. Scan it, put it on an external hard drive, and I don't care how big your paper pile is. I don't care how big it is. Guess what? Measure the square footage and then put it on an external hard drive. That's adaptive behavior. Okay? What can you do? One thing that is adaptive behavior to move you forward. Okay.
Can you do it? Yes, you can. Yes, you can.